Okay, so I want to talk about one of the flaws of democracy, okay? And oftentimes what I think people do is they put democracy up on this pedestal as if it is as if it's some infallible system, political system. But I'm going to explain to you a flaw that can make or break a democracy, okay? And what's interesting about this flaw is that not only can it make or break a democracy, but it can actually make or break any political or economic system in existence, okay? And this flaw is division, okay? Division among the citizens. So, to explain this, I'm going to give you the relevant example, okay? We're going to talk about the United States. So, in the U.S. today, we have what I will describe as growing authoritarianism, okay? And to provide some examples of that, let's look at the Trump administration right now. Trump has funded ICE, okay, to essentially remove illegal immigrants from the country. But there's some collateral damage here, right? He is arresting law-abiding U.S. citizens, right? He's invading the citizens of the United States without due process, without warrants, right? And he is arresting them again. And this is authoritarianism, okay, through and through. There is no way to argue against it. There are also book bans that the Republican Party is looking to push through right now. There are abortion bans, right? All of these things are authoritarian actions. Now, on the other hand, let's give you some more examples of authoritarianism, okay? In 2021, about 4 years ago, September 2021, Biden mandated vaccines for federal employees. This is also an authoritarian action, and I don't care how fucking far left you are. I don't care how much of a humanist you think you are. By mandating vaccines, it is authoritarian. You are stripping the right of an individual's bodily autonomy from them. It is no different than banning abortion. You are taking the bodily autonomy from the individuals. Okay, you can't do it. This is the problem with division. Okay, what is happening is the democracy is being used to implement the majority's desires. Okay, and right now, unfortunately, the majority's desires are to essentially commit tyrannical actions against the minority. Right, so Democrat Party wins. Democrat Party implements vaccine mandates. Republican Party wins the next election, and now they are raiding Chicago with ICE, right? By giving ICE billions of dollars, right? We have to understand how this interplay works between the Democrat and Republican Party. The connection I need you to see here is that when the Democrat Party does something authoritarian, the Republican Party responds in kind, okay, and vice versa, okay? And as far as who started this mess, I don't even care. It doesn't matter who started the mess. The truth is, I don't think the mess was started by working class Republicans or working class Democrats. I think the mess was started by somebody else who was manipulating the public to, again, become divided amongst themselves. This is called a divide and conquer strategy. This is the fundamental problem with democracy, is that if a conqueror can manage to divide the population amongst themselves, the voting population, then the voting population will be inclined to use the government to control their political opposition. And what they won't see is the next election cycle when their political opposition returns that control back on them. Okay? When you're afraid of something, you naturally try to gain control of the fear, right? If you're afraid of a wild bear coming in and attacking you while you're on a hike, you're probably going to bring some bear spray, right? Maybe you bring a gun. This is a defense mechanism, okay? Defense mechanisms are logical. Again, we try to gain control over the things we fear. But when you use the government to control your political opposition, you are not actually getting rid of that fear. All you're doing is offloading that fear onto somebody else. And they're going to be obligated to respond in kind. Again, the next election cycle, right? So, again, it's not just democracy that can be made or broken by this division, okay? So let's talk about capitalism, which is an economic ideology. It's an economic system. let's imagine this capitalistic economy exists in a perfect free market, okay? There's no government. In this economy, if the population becomes divided, then what happens is the employers take advantage of that division. And they do so by shoving the wages down of the employees, right? In other words, capitalism can present with massive wealth inequality as it is now. And without organization, which is the opposite of division, so if there's high division, there's low organization. Without organization in the workplace among the employees, the employers are they're gonna shove their wages down and they're gonna pay out dividends to all the shareholders, right? But if there is high cooperation, high organization, low division in a capitalistic economy, then the workers, the employees, are going to create unions, and they're going to create worker cooperatives, and they're going to boycott the companies that are exploiting the employees. And from there, what's going to happen is you're going to see equality manifest inside a capitalistic economic framework. So we have to understand that it's not capitalism versus socialism, okay? Let's talk about socialism for a minute. In a socialist economy, you try to use the government to redistribute resources, right? But what happens if that government gets captured captured by corporate interests because the voting population becomes divided and they elect a bunch of corporate-backed politicians, as is going on in the United States right now? Well, then what happens is you get a socialism for the rich phenomenon, right? Where all of the tax dollars are somehow or another being shuffled back into the pockets of corporations, right? Where you have a military-industrial complex or a pharmaceutical-industrial complex that are buying or paying for the campaign funding of these politicians, only for those politicians to go and write economic policy that benefits those corporations, right? So again, as I said, it's not capitalism versus communism. It's not even democracy versus dictatorship. It's not any. All of these systems, again, can be made or broken by division among the citizens. Okay, you can have a benevolent dictator, believe it or not. It is possible for a benevolent dictator to create a thriving nation if he remains benevolent, or she, right? But if the population becomes divided amongst themselves, and that dictator takes it upon himself to take advantage of that division, then you have a divide and conquer strategy. Again, the division is the only thing that matters. If you do not remain vigilant, okay, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. If you do not remain vigilant, then you're going to be manipulated into hating your neighbor because they have a different political party, right? This doesn't work, okay? It doesn't work. If you imagine a small tribe of 20 people, if those people get divided into two tribes of Republican and Democrat, they're going to be fighting very quickly, if not running from each other, okay? They're going to resort to fight or flight mechanisms very quickly. The point here is that you cannot prioritize your identity with any subgroup within humanity, okay? If you pour your life into football, it doesn't mean you're going to go kill the baseball players, right? It doesn't mean you're going to go and vote for a government who bans the game of baseball, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to enjoy your game of football. You're going to enjoy competing and winning those competitions and losing, but you're not going to try to ban the baseball players. This is how we have to treat politics. We cannot use the government to control people just because they're from a different political party, just because they have a different economic ideology. We have to learn to respect our mutual fears across these political ideologies. We have to learn to understand how our authoritarian actions fuel the authoritarian actions of our opposition. Until you step back and admit to your own authoritarian actions or your own support of authoritarian actions, you're going to continue to spiral into this authoritarian leapfrog game that we're playing right now. It won't work. It will collapse the United States as we know it. But then again, truth is, remember I said, you don't want to prioritize your identity with any subgroup within humanity. And that includes nations, okay? I'm not a patriot for America. I'm a patriot for humanity because that's what's required in this globalizing world today. It requires you to understand that somebody was paid a slave wage in order to create the phone or the screen that you're watching this video on right now. We have to become conscious of this. We have to learn, again, to prioritize that identity with humanity. It doesn't mean that you, again, can't enjoy a sports game. You can't enjoy your defeating your sports rival, right? But Michigan and Ohio State fans don't generally attack each other after the game, okay? They don't generally go to the cops and try to or try to vote politicians who are going to ban Michigan or Ohio State from the NCAA or whatever, okay? So again, think about this. I want you to make a connection between the authoritarian actions of the Democrat Party and of the Republican Party. And when you do that, you will start to see how these defense mechanisms are playing out and how democracy is fundamentally being torn apart because we are divided. So thanks for watching.